so honored to be able to introduce to you this evening our star, who has been representing us so well at the national level in the conflict that we all know is going on. Michele she is a staunch conservative, and that's what we need right now. So please welcome her with everything you have, Congressman Michele Bachmann. Good evening, Oskaloosa. How are you? It is so great to be here, and thank you so much for your patience. I understand you had a wonderful dinner tonight, right? Did you thank the cook? Kiss the cook and thank the cook. That's what I always say in my house. So I'm glad that you had a wonderful dinner. And we are just thrilled to be able to be here. We have some of our family here tonight. We have my husband Marcus, right here. I'm a dairy farmer, so he feels very much at home coming down here to be with me in Iowa. And our daughter is here tonight too. I don't know if she's in the room yet or not, but is she here? Sophia's here. There she is. Say hi, Sophia. We have had a wonderful day. We have been all over Iowa. We will stay all over Iowa because I'm from Iowa. I was born in Waterloo and raised in Waterloo and Cedar Falls, and these are my roots. And I tell everyone everything I need to know I learned in Iowa. You don't have to go anywhere else but Iowa to learn the lessons of life. It is such a magnificent state, and I also want you to know that I've still got dirt on my high heels from Story County. We were just over at the fair today, and we've still got the dirt from the cow barn and the horse barn on us. We had such a great day, and we tried out the pies at the Methodist booth, and my husband said strawberry rhubarb. I went with straight peach, but I'll tell you, those women can make crusts. I just got to tell you, they know how to do it. Well, we are thrilled to be able to be here, and as was stated, we are at a very different time in our history, aren't we? It's very different from anything else that we have seen before. But there was a visionary who came along about 3 decades ago. And as you recall, there was a new term that came out called the misery index. Do you remember that in the 1970s? Marcus and I are 55 years old. We remember that. We remember Jimmy Carter. We remember what it was like to see interest rates when you went to buy a home. You could hardly buy a home. You had to get it on contract for deed. Does anybody remember that? Yeah. In the late 1970s. You remember how sky high, not only the interest rates were, how sky high the unemployment was. There were gas lines. I remember standing one night in a gas line or sitting in my car, and I had been there for an hour in a gas line. I got up there and they cut the line off right in front of my car. And I thought, oh, this is truly misery. And of course, prices were shooting up. Everything seemed like it didn't make sense. On foreign policy, that's when President Carter sat on his hands, if you recall, when the Shah of Iran was in trouble. The Shah fell. That was the rise of Ayatollah Khomeini. Do you remember that? Yeah. That changed everything in the world. And that was about the same time when we saw the beginning of radical jihad take place across the world. It was a very different time. And a lot of people were depressed. And a lot of people thought, where is this country going to go? And that's why we had a visionary come along. Because people had never seen the country slide down in their memory like they'd seen in the late 1970s. This visionary came along. And this visionary decided that we were going in the wrong direction. He decided that he had a different vision for the future. He talked to all of us about this magnificent speech that had been given by a pilgrim pastor when he was coming on the ship called the Arabella in 1630 across the Atlantic. His name was John Winthrop. And John Winthrop gave a speech on board the Arabella. And I can only paraphrase it. I don't have it committed to memory. But he said to the pilgrims as they came across, there's a reason why we came here. And we came here because we have a message. We have a message that we want to share with the Native American people. We have something called the gospel. We want to bring the gospel to this new land, and we want to live lives that are very different, so that people in this new land will take a look at not only our words, but watch something that's even more powerful. It's the way we live, the way we treat each other, what we value, how we show our love for each other. And so Winthrop said, if we deal falsely with our God, and if we deal falsely with each other, then we will be, he said, we want to be that city on a hill. He took that from the book of Isaiah. He said, we want to be that city on a hill. We want to be that representation of how we should get along and how we should treat each other. But if we come to this land and we don't deal right with each other, and if we don't deal right with God, then we will become but a story and a byword. And we've seen that with nations, haven't we, over time? Where once they were a great nation, and then something happened, and they weren't anymore. Well, they came here, they brought the gospel, they lived their lives, they did what they said they were going to do. They lived like that shining city upon a hill. And Reagan, 30 years ago, gave that speech. And he said, that's exactly who we are as a nation. And that's what we can be again. He reminded the people of this nation, it's not too late to hearken back to what John Winthrop said. Even though all of the indicators look like we're on a downhill slide and we will never come back, this gentleman said, yes, we can. You've heard that phrase before, right? Yes, we can. Only this time it was coming from the lips of Ronald Reagan. And when then Governor Reagan thankfully became President Reagan, we did have a new sheriff in town, so to speak. And we had a whole new way of looking at our country. And it changed us forever. Because we saw unparalleled prosperity that we have not seen since and that we hadn't seen before. And it was pretty common sense. It's what I learned growing up here in Iowa. You do not spend more money than what you take in. It was a great idea. And that is the kind of thinking that Ronald Reagan brought to the White House. One thing that I have seen in my time in Congress is something I never thought I would see before. I saw people spend money hand over fist without even thinking twice about what it was going to mean back here. Now, like I said, that's not how I was raised. I was born in Waterloo, as I said, and my dad had been in the United States Air Force, and he was in college at the time. It was called the State Teachers College of Iowa. It's now called UNI. And he was up there in college, and he and my mom did the very best they could. We were lower middle class people at best, but they were good, decent, upright, hardworking people. My dad eventually became an engineer at Chamberlain Corporation. He worked there until I was in the 6th grade, and then he got a job at Honeywell up in Minneapolis, and up we went to Minnesota. Well, in about a year or so after getting to Minnesota, unfortunately, my parents were divorced. And when they were divorced, our family went to below poverty overnight. That happens a lot of times in families. It's not atypical. It can happen. Well, my mother had been a full-time homemaker, and she went out into the workforce. She did the very best she could. She got a job. She made $4,800 a year, and we did with what we had, but we just couldn't make it on that. So all of the kids, we all got jobs. My brothers delivered papers. I also got a job babysitting. I made 50 cents an hour. That was big money back then. And we had help. And it was one of the greatest life lessons. And one thing that we teach our children is don't despise small beginnings. Don't think of suffering as being something that you necessarily need to abhor. Because it's during those times when life doesn't always go the way you thought it was going to go. Has anybody had times like that? It's happened to me, where life doesn't go the way you thought it was going to go. Those are the times where it's like sandpaper. And it actually, if we're willing to learn through that time, it can actually make us better. And that's what our mom told us. She said, you know, it's not always going to be like that. As a matter of fact, I watched our family. We put our house up for sale. It was a 4-bedroom home, and it was, you know, we weren't rich. We were, you know, lower middle class, but we put that house up for sale. I watched my mom take all of her wedding gifts and the pretty dishes that were in the dining room, put them out on card tables in the driveway, and we sold it at a garage sale. Everything had to go. We just couldn't afford it anymore. And so we moved into a tiny little apartment, and there were years of struggle. But my mom said something to me that stuck with me. She said, Michele, there is one thing that never can be taken away from you, and it's this. It's your education. If you will do well in school, that's going to help you go a long way. And so I listened to her. We had really good schools here in Iowa when I was little. Do you remember the little number 2 pencil, and you fill out that oval for your Iowa Basic Skills test? We were so proud because Iowa was always number 1 in the nation on the Iowa Basic Skills test, and we didn't want to let anybody down, so we wanted to do well on those tests too. We were grateful for the education that we had growing up here in Iowa. But I listened to my mother, and I did as well as I possibly could in school, and I worked really hard. And it was a great life lesson that she taught us. And so I went to college, and when I was in college, I met my husband. And while we were there in college, we also, both of us worked quite a few jobs. He worked about 3 jobs, I worked about 3 jobs, and we had made a decision then at that point that we knew things were looking like we were going to get married. We just made a decision that we were going to stick it out for the long haul. It doesn't always happen. I had seen it not happen that way, but we decided that's what we were going to do. We also had broken hearts for kids who had come out of difficult situations. So we were married, and we put ourselves through graduate school. I went to law school, and then I went to a postdoctorate program in federal tax law at William & Mary. My husband went through his master's program. He went through his doctorate program. And he's a clinical psychologist. We opened up 2 successful clinics that we run. So we started a successful small business company, and we employ people. We're very proud of that. We do a wonderful professional service out of our business. And I worked for years as a tax lawyer. And when I was working as a tax lawyer, I saw firsthand, up close and personal, how devastating high taxes are on farmers and individuals and businesses and families. And I saw how impossible this tax code is. You know, today the tax code is approximately 3.8 million words. Now, how do you read that before you fill out your tax form on April 15th? Well, I made a call one day to Washington, D.C. When I made the call, it was over one little issue in the tax code that I was having. And it was about 14 words in the tax code. I had to get rerouted through about 19 different times till I finally got to the right person. Has that ever happened to you when you deal with government? About 19 times I finally got to the right person. When I got to the right person, we had our conversation. They weren't going to yield. They were in Washington. They were a bureaucrat. And when all was said and done, I put the phone back down in the cradle. That's back in the days when I used to do that. I swiveled around in my chair. I looked out the window, and I thought, the average taxpayer doesn't have a chance against a big phalanx of bureaucrats like Washington, D.C. And I saw how unyielding this tax code is. And it's really a job-killing tax code. That's what it does. It prevents us from being able to soar and do what so many people know what to do. And that's to take their creativity, add it to their labor, take a little bit of money, and start something. Everyone has a dream. Everyone has something that they want to achieve or do in life. And I saw that firsthand. Well, we started our own company as well. And then, as I had said, our hearts were broken for at-risk kids. And so my husband and I, when we were first married, we took unwed mothers into our home. We brought them in, we tried to counsel them, offer them advice, offer them friendship, and give them a positive alternative to their situation, which would be adoption. So we gave them those options. I went through childbirth classes with several women and were with them when they gave birth to babies, and we tried to bring a pro-life option to them. When my husband and I were in college, we'd gone to a film series by Dr. Francis Schaeffer called How Shall We Then Live? And in that film series, Dr. Schaeffer said something that stuck with us. He said that the life issue is the watershed issue of our time. And how we come out on that issue of whether we'll stand for life or not really does impact your thinking and how you come out on a lot of other issues. And we thought that made a lot of sense to us. And so we didn't want to just talk the pro-life talk. We wanted to actually do something about it and reach out and be a part of that solution. So we work for unwed mothers, but it doesn't just stop there. It goes beyond. Because there are a lot of children that come out of very challenging home situations. And so we decided when we saw a couple in our church take in foster children that we would do the same thing. And so we opened up our heart and we opened up our home, and over the years we brought 23 foster children into our home. First we took in one, we weren't too sure, and then we got a call, would we take another? We'd take another. Got another call, would we take another? Yes, we did. Got a call, would we take another? Now when you added that to our 5, we had 9 kids in the house. We couldn't get everyone around the kitchen table anymore, so we had to blow a wall out and add a room so we could get a bigger table, and it was all worth it. Because these kids taught us so much, and it was a great experience for our children, and I'm just grateful that we could do it. One day, one of our foster daughters, who was in 11th grade, brought home a homework assignment. Now, we had homeschooled our biological children, and then after so many years, we put them into a private Christian school. The state of Minnesota did not allow us to do that for our foster children. The only option we had was to put them in public school, which we did. We had a good experience in our public school, but I was alarmed by what I saw coming home in the backpack. In 11th grade, our foster daughter brought home for her math assignment a poster to color. And I saw that, and I thought, well, now that's interesting, coloring in 11th grade. One thing I had learned growing up, hearkening back to my mother, is that if you want a chance to make it, you need a decent education, and you've got to apply yourself. And so I knew if we had a poor education system, that wouldn't help our foster children. If anyone needed a leg up, those kids needed a leg up. And so I got involved. I gave 5 years of my life to the education reform movement. And I found out that all 50 states had put in a very bureaucratic, top-down federal government takeover, in effect, of the local public schools. It was called Bowles 2000 and School to Work. And I had put together a 2-hour program, had done a number of hours of research, and I went all across the state of Minnesota. Minnesota, as you may know, is not exactly Iowa. It's a little different. I love Minnesota, but it's a liberal state. I'm the first Republican woman ever to get elected out of Iowa, and our senator, you may know, is Al Franken. And so we have a very different view of the world up there. But in this very liberal state, I went all over the state and explained to people what the problems were in our public schools. That it wasn't your local teacher's fault. It was the fact that the federal government came in and gave the schools a little bit of money, but with a whole lot of rules and regulations and mandates. And all of a sudden the schools had to change everything that they were doing successfully and do this nonsense that the federal government wanted them to do. And it was a disaster. And it was bringing test scores down as a result of it. And after 5 years, Minnesota became the only state in the nation at that time to repeal this effort. Because after I would go around the state and explaining to people what was happening with their children, 2 things would happen. Parents would say, first of all, not with my kid you don't. And number 2, where's my pitchfork? How do I sign up to get rid of this program? And no one thought it could be done, but we did it. And I was Pollyanna enough to believe, yes, you can fight City Hall. I tell you that story because now, as a member of the United States Congress, I have been on the front lines and observed as Congress passed one bureaucratic nightmare after another. And the biggest one of all is Obamacare. And I have watched them as they pass this unwieldy, impossible bill that is, in essence, socialized medicine. And the crown jewel of socialism is socialized medicine. And I am here to tell you tonight that as President of the United States, I am not going to rest until we repeal Obamacare. Is something that the American people are for. They want us to get rid of this bill. There's over a half trillion, over 500 billion in new taxes that start in 2013. That's right around the corner. We have, in my estimation, one chance to kill Obamacare, and that's in 2012. This is not going to be easy. Even though we have the American people with us, it is not going to be easy. Why? It's already law today. It's already being implemented. Hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars are being shipped all over the country today to implement this very bad bill. It also steals over $500 billion out of Medicare. That's right. Now think about this. We have more people than ever going into Medicare. More people than ever requiring those services. And we've just watched the president steal over $500 billion out of Medicare when we could least afford it, and then downshift it into Obamacare for younger people. What are we going to do? Where are we going to get that money? He's already jumped taxes up over $500 billion on Obamacare. Now he's talking this weekend about more $1 trillion of taxes that he wants to increase with raising the debt ceiling. So where are we supposed to go? I mean, you only have so much there. You stick your hand in your pocket, you pull it out, it's lint and feathers and a couple pebbles and maybe a dime or two. That's all we have left. But his plan is, when you look at the debt ceiling, where is it? There's no plan. Have you noticed that? Yeah. Here he is, telling us it's fiscal Armageddon. We're coming up to August 2nd, and that's supposedly the day that everything is going to fall apart, and the guy has zero plan. Because his plan is, we keep spending more. We keep borrowing more. We keep adding to the debt more. What's the one thing he is unwilling to do? Cut. Oh, he talks about cuts. When are those cuts? Maybe 10 years from now? When are the tax increases? Oh, like right now. So small businesses, do you remember about 2 weeks ago, the president said, you have to eat your peas. Do you remember that? Yeah. Which means, buddy, you're getting taxed more. That's what that means. This president has one idea and one idea only. It is redistribution of wealth, the government taking over more, and the government spending more and adding to the debt burden. Let me tell you, I came into Congress in 2006. I was sworn in 2007. Coincidentally, the exact same moment that Nancy Pelosi got the gavel in her hand. I've been on the front lines watching this whole thing come down over the last 5+ years. That's why I am so absolutely convinced of this position that I'm taking, and why it is that I felt I needed to run for the presidency of the United States, because I've seen it all. I've seen what these people are capable of, and I know without a shadow of a doubt, if we do not have a president who understands the times that we live in, the perils and the problems that we are facing that are very real right now, and that if we fail to have a president who understands what to do, who gets the solutions to how you turn the economy around, to how you actually create jobs, and who has the steely resolve to do what needs to be done to repeal Obamacare, it will not be done. Because we've seen, we have two teams, don't we? We have two teams. We have our team, and there's the other team. 3 decades ago, when Ronald Reagan took over, he was a very different kind of president. very different kind of president. What Ronald Reagan did for us was this. He made two decisions. He decided that he was going to win the Cold War. That was a bold move. He also decided he was going to turn the economy around and do it in a bold way by taking tax rates down to a rate that was lower than anyone had seen. And he had to work with the Democrat House of Representatives. But he did it. He figured out how to do it. He understood something that was profound. He understood that you cannot win the Cold War unless you have prosperity. Take a lesson for today. I say that because I sit on the House Financial Services Committee. My committee chair was Barney Frank. I watched the entire financial meltdown with Barney Frank as my committee chair. I saw what was happening with that effort. This was, in my estimation, a government-induced financial meltdown because of the programs that government put into place, because the Federal Reserve had an easy money policy. And by the way, Ron Paul is right, you audit the Fed, and I am on that legislation. The Federal Reserve is out of control. I also sit on the House Select Committee on the Intelligence. I tell you this because we are a very small select committee. We deal with the nation's classified secrets. We see every day the threats that the United States faces, both within our borders and for the United States coming outside of our borders. One thing that you need to know, and it's very grave and very sober, that there are people who wake up every single day thinking about how they can kill Americans. We can never lose sight of that. And we have an administration right now, President Obama, who has said when it comes to foreign policy, he intends to lead from behind. Have you ever heard a president of the United States say they're going to lead from behind? That's Barack Obama. I am here to tell you, as Commander-in-Chief, I fully intend to lead from the front. I will not lead from behind. In the United States Air Force. He was at the Lowry Air Force Base out in Colorado. My stepfather served honorably in the United States Army, and my brother retired full United States Navy. Don't think for a moment that any of us would have the privilege of being in a room like this tonight without a strong military. We will stand for our brave men and women in uniform. We need our veterans. We will stand with our veterans, and we will stand with our active duty military as well. And this president, I believe, has put us in a position of weakness. When the president came out and said in May that Israel needed to retreat to its indefensible 1967 borders, the president sent a signal to the other 26 nations surrounding Israel that guess what? The United States doesn't have Israel's back. What did that do for the Middle East region when he made that announcement? All that has done is take an already hostile situation and amp it up. Take a look, just like we saw with Jimmy Carter and the Shah of Iran. Take a look at what happened with this president when it came to Egypt. Probably one of the better friends of the United States in the Middle East region from the Arab community is Egypt. The head was Mubarak. Mubarak was in trouble. What did President Obama do when Mubarak was in trouble? He sat on his hands. Mubarak left that situation, and now Egypt is being controlled by the military. Here's something you need to know. Israel and Egypt had a 30-year peace treaty. Now there's new calls to end that peace treaty. The only reason we were able to keep the level of peace that we did was because of that peace treaty that had been negotiated. Here's something else about Egypt. What do they control? The Suez Canal. What have they allowed to come in the Suez Canal since Mubarak fell? 2 Iranian warships have gone through into the Mediterranean, and they are now docked in Syria. These are very serious times that we're facing in the Middle East region. And then the biggest issue of all is a nuclear Iran. President Obama has taken his eyes off the prize in the Middle East region, which is a nuclearized Iran, which we must never have. Because the president of Iran has said quite unequivocally that once he has nuclear power, he will destroy Israel. He will take Israel out. He said he will wipe it off the map. And he said he will also use that nuclear weaponry on the United States of America as well. When President Obama came in, one of the first items that he was willing to cut for spending, nothing else, he was willing to cut missile defense. Now, the last thing that I would cut as President of the United States is missile defense. Because the one thing the United States needs is to have a shield. Do you remember this with President Reagan? It was called SDI. What is it that brought Russia to its knees with the Cold War? It was the threat of a shield. And we had the economic powerhouse that he created through his low-tax, limited government policies to be able to build up and create, through a peace-through-strength policy, a strong America, so that Reagan could reach the second goal, which was to end the Cold War. Is the world better off because of what Reagan did to bring us prosperity? Without a shadow of a doubt. Is the world better off because the United States won effectively the Cold War without a shadow of a doubt? Will the world be better off, I ask you, if China becomes the economic powerhouse of the world? I say not. I say the world is far better off with the United States of America as the economic powerhouse of the world. That's what we would remain under a Bachmann presidency. And the formula, to be honest with you, is not that tough to figure out. Right now, all the people in Washington are wailing and gnashing their teeth and can't come up with an answer. Well, let me tell you, there is an answer. You dramatically reduce government spending. And why shouldn't we? President Obama ramped it up to never before heard levels of spending. Never forget, it was then candidate, Senator Obama, who was the first one out of the gate for the $700 billion Wall Street bailout. He was for it. I voted for George Bush twice. I am proud to be a Republican. But I took on my own party over the $700 billion bailout. Behind closed doors, I took on the Treasury Secretary and asked him to put forward his evidence why, for the first time in the history of the country, we should give him a $700 billion blank check after we'd already bailed out Bear Stearns' $29 billion, which we've never done before. That's a private investment bank on Wall Street. Why are you taking tax money to bail out a private company? Why are you doing that? Number two, AIG. You could go down the list. That's what I did with our Treasury Secretary. I said, based upon everything we've done, you haven't turned the economy around. Now you want us to give you a $700 billion blank check? What's your evidence? How's that going to turn us around? He didn't have any. I said, well, if you don't have evidence, you don't have my vote. He didn't get my vote. And they lost the first vote on the floor because we were able to keep quite a few people off that vote. Eventually they got that never before seen $700 billion bailout. President Obama was for it. And because of that outrageous bailout, that led to then President Obama's absolutely obscene $1 trillion failed stimulus, where he said, if we borrow $1 trillion from China and countries like that, then we will not see unemployment go above 8%. Do you remember that? Yeah. Well, how's that working out? We're at 9.2% unemployment. And it doesn't look like it's coming down anytime soon. This president has a big, fat, red F on his economic report card. And that's why I know without a shadow of a doubt, he will be a one-term president. Because you see, it is quite simple. You simply stop the spending. That's really where it begins. And actually, it'd be fun if you try. It would actually be fun if you try. Take a look, for instance, at one area that I brought up, the Department of Education. That Department of Education came in the late 1970s. Jimmy Carter put that into effect. And all we have seen is more mandates, government control, and we've seen test scores continue to slide. We would be far better off if we would tell all the local school districts, the federal money that you're used to now, you'll be getting it, but it will be diminishing over the next couple of years until we zero it out. Because what I will do is put forward a bill to repeal all of the federal rules and regulations on the Department of Education. We will repeal all the mandates. It will all be gone because the states do a great job on their own. Thank you very much. We will turn off the lights. We will lock the door. And we will shut down the federal Department of Education. Locally in a bad situation, they'll continue to get their money, but I will tell you a number of superintendents have said to me, I would much prefer to have you take away all the mandates and all the rules and all the regulations. Keep your money. I don't even need it. I'll be better off if I don't have it. Sure. And I'm saying we slowly wean them off, maybe over a 3-year period, and go down to zero. That's just one department. Here's the other department that needs some very serious work, the EPA. Have you ever heard of the EPA? It is the job-killing agency of America. And the EPA, through its cap-and-trade policies, it passed through the House of Representatives, not with my vote. It was so bad, even Harry Reid couldn't get it through the Senate. But President Obama didn't care what you thought. He decided to direct the EPA to go ahead and implement the cap-and-trade bill anyway. What's cap-and-trade? It shuts down American energy production and it increases basically a national energy tax. What a deal! Less energy, higher prices, and now a national energy tax. What could be better for a liberal? That's where they're coming from. I take a very different view from that. This is my opinion. I think what we need to do is open up American energy production from every source in the United States of America. We have got the best story to tell in the United States. The Congressional Research Service put forward a report this year that said that if you take every energy resource in the United States and convert it to barrel of oil equivalent, we are the #1 energy resource-rich nation in the world. Do you know that we have more oil in 3 western states in the form of shale oil than all of Saudi Arabia put together? That's just 3 western states. That doesn't include Alaska. That doesn't include the Gulf region. That doesn't include all the oil that we have in the Atlantic, in the Pacific, in the Bakken oil field up in North Dakota. We have incredible oil reserves, including up in the Arctic. We have so much. So much. Why in the world does OPEC have America in a stranglehold? We should have OPEC in a stranglehold because we dry up their customer list. We provide our own energy in the United States. One of the largest natural gas fields was recently found in Pennsylvania. Trillions of cubic square feet of natural gas. And you probably know you can take natural gas and you can convert cars to be able to use liquid natural gas. This is phenomenal what we can do in our country. We have 25% of all the coal in the world in the United States. And what was President Obama's response? He said when he was running to be president that under his policies, electricity prices would necessarily skyrocket. That's his plan for all of you. Higher prices, higher taxes. In other words, a diminished United States of America. I would say President Obama is succeeding wildly in achieving his goals. But I would say his goals have nothing to do with what the people in Oskaloosa, Iowa see as your goals. Why? Because I know you. I'm one of you. I was born here. I grew up here. I was loved and taught by reasonable, fair-minded people, the people of Iowa. And it's this voice that I learned growing up that I have taken very successfully to the halls of Congress and that I intend to take to the White House where it has a program. Do you know that the next time the United States goes up into space, do you know how we're going to get there? We have to put our thumb out because we have to hitchhike a ride with the Russians. Do you know who's putting a space program into place right now? The Chinese. And so the Russians are in space, the Chinese are going to be in space. How do you think that it's going to work for an American missile defense shield? What if these nations decide that's what they want to do? Remember, Russia has nuclear power. Remember, China has nuclear power. Whose side are these nations on? This is something very serious that we have to think of. And there's a report that came out some time ago that said that President Obama was saying he's going to have a new mission for NASA. And one of his leaders in NASA said to a reporter that the president told him that the new mission for NASA was to be an outreach agency to the Muslim community and to the Muslim world. Now, I'm not saying anything negative about Muslims when I say that. I'm just saying that's what one of his administrators reported, that that was the new mission for NASA. Now, NASA should be about space. NASA should be about advancing research, development, innovation, the next level, what we can do. Because we are the greatest country in the history of 5,000 years of recorded literature. We're it. We're the greatest that has ever been. The United States of America. I believe in innovation. I believe in technology. We did it in the 1950s. We've been doing it recently. Do you remember in the 1950s what one of the biggest health challenges that the United States faced? Maybe some of you remember polio. Do you remember the threat of polio? Yeah, this was real. Even back in those days, our government was estimating it would cost our nation upwards of $100 billion. That's back when the budget, back in the early 1950s, wasn't even $100 billion. That's what a worry polio was. A private charity named March of Dimes put money into this research effort, and they put money behind Jonas Salk. And they came up with a Salk vaccine. Maybe some of you have that little vaccine on your arm. I got mine when I was here in elementary school in Iowa. And this nation, this beautiful, magnificent nation, changed the world because we created a vaccine that changed people's lives forever. And we essentially eradicated polio, and we saved our nation hundreds of billions of dollars. Do you know that today, 75% of the venture capitalists in the medical community, those are the people that put money into creating the next Jonas Salk polio vaccine, the next pacemaker, the next great miracle in medicine. 75% of those investors have taken a look at America and they've said, I'm going to take a pass and I'm going to invest in something else. Because the FDA and the federal government have made it so difficult to create a new drug in this country or a new medical device in this country that the producers are going to other countries. They're going to China. They're going to Singapore. They're going to other locations because it's a lot easier to produce there than it is here. Are we becoming the head or are we becoming the tail? I have observed this. When I came into office in 06, I was sworn in January of 07. Do you know what our national debt was? It took us about 230 years to get our national debt. This is the official national debt. This doesn't include the entitlement programs. The official national debt was $8.67 trillion the day that I came into office. When President Obama came in to office, it was then $10 trillion. Today, the national debt is $14.3 trillion. Remember, it was 8 when I came in, 8.67. Today, it's 14.3. The debate that you have heard on TV today, or you've heard recently about increasing the debt ceiling, would add another $2.4 trillion to get us up to $16.7 trillion. In other words, I came in, it was $8 trillion and change, you might say. Now it's going to be $16 trillion and change. In the time that I've been in just over 5 years, it's doubled. But it took us 230 years to get to. Do you see why I am so adamant about this issue of fiscal sanity? This is why every time the vote has come up, I have voted a resounding no to increase the debt ceiling. Because you can't afford it, I can't afford it, the next generation can't afford it. And that's why this week I voted no to increase the debt ceiling. Instead, the country fail and go into default. Instead, Steve King of Iowa and myself introduced a bill, and we said, look, President Obama, we're going to call your bluff. You're talking about the country going in default? Excuse me? We have enough revenue coming in the month of June to pay off the interest on the debt. There's no need to go into default, Mr. President. Let's take this issue off the table. Let's stop scaring people about this issue. And so we put the bill forward to take that issue of interest off the table, pay it. We'll sign the check, I'll sign it. Let's do it, let's get her done. And let's also take off the table this political pawn of our brave men and women serving in the military and saying they're not going to get their paycheck. Let's take that off the table. Take the military off the table. Take the interest off the table so we aren't in default. The reason why he doesn't want to take those political playthings off the table is because he wants to toy with you. Because he does not want to do what has to be done. That is, act like adults and deal with spending priorities and do what my mother said. We're going to have to do without. We're going to have, necessity is going to have to be the mother of invention. We're just going to have to spend only what we've got now. We're going to have to wait, stretch till the end of the month. That's not the president's plan. That's my plan. That's my plan. And as President of the United States, I want you to know I will be tireless. I am a strong fiscal conservative. I get the economy. I know how it works. And I know what has to be done to turn it around. And I am going to see it through as President of the United States, because the good news is it won't take a year to turn it around. It's 1 quarter to turn it around, to begin to get the jobs to grow again. And all we are lacking right now is the political will to do it. I have got that will because I have got a titanium spine right back here. And I have the spine to stand up and do it. I'm a fiscal conservative. I'm also a very strong peace through strength conservative. I believe in a strong military. I believe in a strong defense, because when we are strong, the rest of the world takes notice. And you see a lot less hostility across the world. I see it every day, unfortunately, on the House Intelligence Committee, being briefed on a daily basis. And of course, I can't share any of that information with you. But that has prepared me to be Commander-in-Chief. And I understand how important our military are. And I understand how real these threats are. And as Commander-in-Chief, there is nothing more important than securing the safety and the security of the American people. You have my word on that, that is job number one. And I'm also a strong social conservative. I believe very strong in the right to life from conception until natural death. And for the first time in Obamacare, we have taxpayer-funded abortion. We've never had that in our nation, and it is one more reason why Obamacare has to go. I also believe very strong in marriage between a man and a woman. I introduced that amendment in the state of Minnesota, and I applaud you for not retaining your 3 judges in Iowa. You sent the shockwave around the country with your action, and I applaud you for what you're doing. Because as President of the United States, I will be appointing only pro-constitutional judges to the Supreme Court who respect our Constitution and its original intent. I'm also a Tea Party conservative as well, and the Tea Party stands for three things. The Tea Party stands for no higher taxes. We are taxed enough already. The Tea Party also stands for having government not spend more money than what it takes in. The third thing that the Tea Party stands for is actually believing that this Constitution means something. It's not optional. And we should act within the limits of the Constitution and do what the people say. That's this radical group called the Tea Party. That's what they believe. Sounds like the Republican Party, if you ask me. And I think that's what our new umbrella will be. It's our unbeatable team for 2012. Look, I know we're going to win in 2012. Without a shadow of a doubt, I know we're going to win. And as nominee of the Republican Party for the presidency of the United States, you have my word. I am going to be tireless on that campaign trail, making sure that I bring not only myself, but 13 more titanium-spined senators with me into Washington, D.C. Why? Because we have to get up to the number 60. Why? Because that means we're filibuster-proof. We can repeal one bill after another, beginning with Obamacare. We will repeal Obamacare. We will repeal all of these bills that the President put forward. And instead, we'll pass a pro-growth economy legislation so that the United States will remain the #1 economic powerhouse in the world. And we will be the nation that the rest of the world looks to, not only for its strength, but also to know they aren't going to take us on. Well, let me end with this. One story my dad told us when we grew up was a story that he was very proud of. It was about 5 brothers in Waterloo, Iowa, and I'm sure that you know them. The family's name was Sullivan, and they were a hard-scrabble family that during the Depression did whatever they could to get by. That's my family's story, too, growing up here in Iowa. They were hard-scrabble people that did everything they could to get by. And the Sullivan brother family had a friend who had been killed on that morning, that fateful morning on December 7th, when Pearl Harbor hit. And so the brothers were outraged when that happened. And they said, we want to sign up because we want to stick together for our country. And so they signed up, and they said on one condition, that we could all be together. And so they were. They were on the USS Juno, and they fought bravely. And they fought bravely all through one night as they were being pounded in a battle. And in the morning, when the dawn broke, a torpedo hit the USS Juno. There were 697 brave souls on that ship. When the torpedo hit, it was absolute chaos. Men and boys were thrown everywhere. Immediately on impact, hundreds were killed. George, the oldest Sullivan brother, was in the water, shouting for the boys, Madison! He shouted for all of their names. He couldn't hear any of them, but he looked. He looked as far as he could. He didn't survive. None of the Sullivans survived. As a matter of fact, of the 697 brave boys and men that were on that ship, only 10 survived that night. It was grief beyond recognition that Mr. and Mrs. Sullivan received when the knock came on their door to tell them that all 5 boys had perished in that one particular battle. But the Sullivans didn't give up, and Mr. and Mrs. Sullivan took their grief and they applied it to the war effort. They went all across the country. This humble, modest, little family from Waterloo, Iowa. And in their grief, Mr. and Mrs. Sullivan went across the nation and said, we have to stand together. We have to do what the boys said. Because one of the brothers wrote home, we're a team that can't be beat. If we stick together, we can't be beat. And that's what Mr. and Mrs. Sullivan told the nation. And the nation bought war bonds, and the nation succeeded. Because together we were a team that couldn't be beat. I believe in 2012, with the Peace Through Strength conservatives, and the fiscal conservatives, and the social conservatives, and the Tea Party movement, that people don't realize is really made up of Democrats who are disaffected and independents and people who've never been political a day in their life, as well as conservatives and Republicans and everybody from every stripe. We have the chance of a lifetime to be that team that can't be beat if we stick together. So we can't factionalize. We come together. We take Iowa, we take South Carolina, we take New Hampshire. I believe without a doubt, 2012 will not only be about just winning the White House. I think this election is going to be a wave election that is going to change this country, perhaps even more phenomenally than Ronald Reagan changed it in the early 1980s. I believe that. Because we are the premier nation of the world. And we are made up of the greatest people. We are made up of people like the 5 Sullivan brothers, and like their parents, and like a Jonas Salk, and like a Norman Borlaug, and like the people who have put into this nation to build it up. That's who we are. That's what I know. That's what I learned growing up in this wonderful state with people just like you. Lovely, reasonable, fair-minded people. Don't give up. Hold on. A better day is coming, just like my mother said, and it did, and it will. In 2012, trust me, we're going to get it all back. We're going to take our country back, and we are going to be better than we have ever been before. Mark my words, you will never see anything like it. We're going to make it happen.